Okay, so welcome to my grade 8 natural sciences photosynthesis lesson. So in grade 7, you should have already learned about photosynthesis and energy. So I'm going to start off with some questions just to see where your base is and what you can recall from your previous study. So what is the main source of energy on Earth?
The sun.
The sun, that's correct. And why is energy important?
We need it to do work or to do work.
Correct. So energy is required by all living things in order to survive. Energy is needed to sustain life, and it drives the interactions and the interdependence in an ecosystem. Do you recall the 7 life processes of all living things?
My goodness.
Okay, so in grade 7, you would have learned about the 7 life processes, and this would have been growth, nutrition, reproduction, respiration, movement, excretion, and sensitivity, or sometimes referred to as stimulus or stimuli. And these are the 7 life processes. In order for something to be classified as a living thing, it needs to be able to do these 7 life processes. And all of these 7 life processes require energy. So as living organisms, for us as humans, where do we get our energy from?
Food.
Food, correct. So we get our energy from the food that we eat. What organisms are able to make their own food for energy? Are we able to make our own food for energy?
No,
Sorry,
no.
repeat the question.
Okay, so as humans, we aren't able to make food, our own food in order to obtain energy. But there are organisms that can make their own food to get energy. And the organisms that are able to make their own food are called green plants. Okay, well, plants, but generally we're looking at green plants that are able to make their own food. Do you know what process green plants use to make their own food?
Photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis, that is correct. So today's lesson is going to be on photosynthesis. We are going to look at the process. We want to be able to define what the process of photosynthesis is. We want to look at the requirements for photosynthesis and what are the products that are formed, and then how to write a word equation for the process of photosynthesis. So do you recall from grade 7 what you require for the process of photosynthesis?
I think sunlight is one of sunlight.
Correct. You can look at the picture to help guide you. Water. And the other one comes from the air around us. It is a gas found in the air.
Oh, carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide. So the requirements needed for photosynthesis are sunlight, or referred to as radiant energy, then the carbon dioxide from the air, and water, which is found in the soil and absorbed through the roots. And then what is also needed is a compound called chlorophyll. Have you guys heard of chlorophyll before?
Yes, somewhere.
So chlorophyll is the compound that is found in the leaves and green parts of plants. And this chlorophyll is what actually enables the plant to trap that sunlight or that radiant energy in order to convert the carbon dioxide in the air and the water absorbed through its root to produce its products of photosynthesis. Do you guys know what the products of photosynthesis are?
Oxygen.
Oxygen is one, yes.
And
glucose.
Glucose, correct. So the main purpose of photosynthesis is to produce glucose, and glucose is the simplest form of food. It's a simple sugar. So that is the main product in photosynthesis, and then oxygen is also produced as a byproduct. Okay, so The definition of photosynthesis is the process whereby green plants convert carbon dioxide, water, and radiant energy or sunlight into glucose, which is food, and oxygen as a byproduct through a series of chemical reactions. Okay, does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay, so repeat back to me, what is the definition of photosynthesis?
Photosynthesis is the process where green plants convert carbon dioxide, water, and energy in the form of sunlight into glucose to use as food and oxygen as a byproduct through a series of chemical reactions.
Fantastic, well done. Okay, so why is this process so important? Because this process produces glucose, and glucose is actually the simplest form of food. It's what we call a simple sugar. And food is converted into energy, and we need that energy for all of our life processes so that we can do all the daily things, such as growing, such as moving, such as respiring. And the sun is where all living things on earth actually get their energy from. So the sun provides both heat and light energy, and plants are these magical organisms that can actually use that light energy and convert it into glucose, which is a stored form of energy. It's a chemical stored form of energy. The plant can then convert that glucose into energy, which it can actually use, which is called ATP. You don't need to know about that at this point, but the chemical molecule that it forms is ATP. So the plant is able to actually use that sunlight to produce glucose. The glucose can then be used to produce a usable form of energy so that the plant can do its life processes. Now, organisms like us, we can't make our own food. So we have to eat plants or other animals in order to get food, to break it down to glucose in order to make energy. So essentially, all organisms on Earth get their energy from the sun, either directly, such as plants, or organisms like herbivores, omnivores get it from the animals they eat, which would have had to have gotten it from plants. Are there any questions?
No, nothing.
You all understand so far?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so here's a nice diagram showing us the process of photosynthesis. So a nice way to summarize photosynthesis is in your workbook, you'd write the heading photosynthesis and then draw a nice green leaf, and on top of the leaf, write the term chlorophyll. So you see there is the word chlorophyll. So chlorophyll is the pigment found inside the green parts of plants. So it is the pigment that enables the plant to absorb the sunlight. It also gives plants a green color. It's a green pigment. So it also gives them their green color, which is why we say that it's the green parts of the plant that is the location of photosynthesis, because they require chlorophyll. So the chlorophyll helps to absorb the sunlight, which then takes your two reactants or requirements, which are carbon dioxide and water. It then converts those molecules into glucose and produces oxygen as a byproduct. So as a nice summary, you can use this sort of diagram. You can simplify it just doing one green leaf and then have the sunlight coming in, the carbon dioxide coming in, and the water coming in. So these are your reactants, your requirements, the things you need in order for photosynthesis to take place. And then on the right-hand side, going out of the leaf, you will have your glucose and your oxygen, and these are your products, the things that are produced through this reaction. Okay, and then what you also need to know is you need to be able to write the word equation for the process of photosynthesis. So can you see below the diagram? Here we have the word equation. So on the left of the arrow, you write your reactants, and on the right, you write your products. So do you see that the words chlorophyll and radiant energy are above and below the arrow? So the reason being is the things that you actually put in are your reactants, and the things that are actually put in for for this reaction to occur are your carbon dioxide and your water. But although these are the requirements, without chlorophyll and without radiant energy or sunlight, this reaction cannot happen. So that is why we put these two things with the arrow. So in other words, we are saying that when carbon dioxide and water react in the presence of chlorophyll and radiant energy, they can then produce your products, which are glucose and oxygen. So that arrow means to produce or to form. And this is how we would write the word equation describing the reaction for photosynthesis. So in your book, under the drawing that you've done, I would suggest that you then write out this chemical word equation and write NB next to it, as it is very important. This is an important equation that you need to know, that is used to describe the process of photosynthesis. Are you all with me so far?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so glucose is the simplest sugar. Plants are able to produce their own glucose through the process of photosynthesis. That glucose can then be converted to other chemical compounds, such as your starch and your cellulose. Have you guys heard of those terms before?
Yeah.
Okay, so these are compounds that are actually made up from glucose. So for example, starch is the storage form of glucose in plants. So for example, do you ever hear when you eat things such as potatoes or something like that, they say that it's got a lot of starch, and that starch
Yes.
is actually stored glucose. So what would happen is glucose can be used immediately and converted to energy in a process called cellular respiration, which we'll actually learn about in the next topic. But any glucose that is not used can be converted to starch and can be stored to be used later, because that starch can then be broken back down into glucose and used to produce energy. The other compound there is cellulose, and cellulose is a building material in plants. It's the most common compound found in the cell wall of plants. So it's actually used to make up plant cells. So does that help? Do you guys understand what I mean by starch and cellulose?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a question to get you thinking. Can seeds undergo photosynthesis?
I suppose if the condition, if you have all the requirements for photosynthesis, then yes.
Okay, so let's look. Do we have the requirements? So I want you to look. Can you see the seed there on the left? Now ignore the thing coming out, because generally a seed is an encased unit on its own. So when we look at that, when we talk about the requirements for photosynthesis, what do we need?
Sunlight.
We need sunlight.
And
So look at where the seed is. Does the seed have access to sunlight?
no. It's
No.
underground.
What is our other requirements?
Water.
Water. Does it have access to water? Yes. So in the soil, it could
Yes.
access water. What else do we need?
The carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide. Does it have access to the carbon dioxide?
No, I don't think underground.
Not underground. What else? What is the last thing that we need? Is that chlorophyll to absorb the sunlight.
Yes.
What color is that seed?
Brown.
Brown. So is there chlorophyll there?
No.
No, because chlorophyll is also what gives it its green pigment. So from what you've now deduced from the picture, do you think seeds can photosynthesize?
No.
No, that is correct. So seeds are not able to photosynthesize. So what happens is when seeds are made by the mother plant, they are made with a large source of starch. So how do you think that's beneficial?
Yeah. The starch is the stored glucose, so it does receive then energy, the seed itself, to start growing.
Correct. So what happens is that seed has to use that starch that it's made with, break it down to glucose, and it will use that to germinate. So that is its first growth. And then do you see in the second one, now it started to form a green part of the plant. And once that green part germinates and sprouts outside of the soil, does it now meet the conditions for photosynthesis?
Yes.
Yes. So initially, a seed does not have the ability to photosynthesize. So it has a lot of stored starch so that it can germinate and sprout. And once it's done that, then the green part of the plant that is now exposed to all the conditions it needs, that is out in the open, can now start to photosynthesize, and the plant can then grow further. Okay. So to test your knowledge, we're going to do a little bit of questions. So what is the main source of energy on Earth?
The sun.
The sun. Oh, I don't know why this is going funny. Okay. Why are animals dependent on plants for energy?
Why are animals depend on plants?
Sorry, Charles, you're breaking up.
Oh, my net is very bad.
Yeah, the signal tonight's very bad. Okay, so animals are dependent on plants for energy because can we make our own food? No, so
No.
we have to eat plants because they contain the stored food in the form of glucose or starch, which we then need in order to produce energy. What is necessary for the process of photosynthesis? So what are the requirements for photosynthesis?
Sunlight, water, carbon dioxide, and the chlorophyll found in the green plants.
Perfect. What is produced by the process of photosynthesis? There's a question missing there. Oh, the answers popped up too. So what is produced by the process of photosynthesis is glucose and oxygen. And then what gases are part of the photosynthesis process? So if you look at our requirements and our products, which of those compounds are gases?
And the carbon dioxide and the oxygen.
Correct. The carbon dioxide and the oxygen. What is the food called that the plant produces?
Glucose.
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 Well done. Great. So these are the references that are used for the lesson. So let's just recap on what we've learned in this lesson. So today we learned about photosynthesis. And what is photosynthesis? It is the process whereby green plants convert carbon dioxide, water, radiant energy or sunlight into glucose and oxygen, which is a byproduct through a series of chemical reactions. So what is glucose? It is the simplest form of food, and it's used by the plants to make energy. And we need this energy for all the life processes. The next topic covered will be cellular respiration, and that will go into how we use glucose and convert it into energy that we can use. So all energy comes from the sun, and green plants are able to use this radiant energy in order to produce chemical potential energy, which is stored in the glucose. Green plants contain a substance called chlorophyll, which is able to trap that radiant energy or sunlight. And with doing that, the plant uses the carbon dioxide from the air, water from the soil, which it absorbs through the roots and transports to the rest of the plant. And together it produces glucose, which is the food that we're looking for. And as a byproduct, oxygen gas is also produced. So to end off this lesson, we are going to just watch a short video on photosynthesis to recap and make sure that you've got a thorough understanding. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see the, okay, so we're going to watch this
Yes.
photosynthesis video, and hopefully this will help visualize all that we've learned in the lesson today.
Did you share the screen also?
Can you not see the screen?
What would life be without photosynthesis?
Can you see it?
Well, you may think it perfectly fine and maybe
Yes.
possibly even be happier because you wouldn't have to learn about it in science lessons. But actually, we wouldn't have life without it. The process of life depends upon it. Not only are photosynthetic organisms the main producers of food, but without photosynthesis, Earth's atmosphere would lose its oxygen. The general gist of what happens in photosynthesis is that green plants and algae trap light from the sun to fix carbon dioxide with hydrogen and water. This makes organic compounds which then provide food for not only the plant itself, but also all animals. So now that we know how important it is and how it starts off all of our food production, you can see why we need to learn more about it in detail. Photosynthesis happens in leaf cells. They contain tiny organelles called chloroplasts, which contains a green substance called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll molecules sit on the surface of the chloroplasts and capture light energy from the sun, which is fundamental for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a chemical reaction in which carbon dioxide and water are converted to glucose and oxygen by the energy provided from the light energy absorbed by chlorophyll. It is an endothermic reaction because it takes in energy from its surroundings. We show the light energy in brackets because whilst it is not a substance, it is an essential requirement for photosynthesis to happen. We could have written the equation like this instead. The equation is a very simple representation for a complex process, but it is as much detail as we need to know at this stage. So we know the light energy comes from the sun and is absorbed by chlorophyll, but where do the carbon dioxide and water come from? Plants absorb water through their roots, and it moves through the plants and into the leaves by transpiration. Watch our video on filament transpiration to learn more about this process. Carbon dioxide enters into the leaves from the air through the stoma on the underside of the leaf. What then happens? Glucose and oxygen are made. Some of the glucose is placed for respiration and some is converted into insoluble starch. This can then be stored and turned back into glucose at a later stage. Oxygen is actually just a byproduct of photosynthesis. There are some useful byproducts in this world: sawdust from the lumber industry, smoke detectors from space research, but I think we can all agree that producing oxygen is the most valuable of all byproducts. Green plants are called producers or autotrophs because they have the ability to produce their own food. They are the start of the food chain, and every animal relies upon them either directly if they are a herbivore like a rabbit, or indirectly if they are a carnivore like a fox. So you just need to remember that carbon dioxide and water react to glucose and oxygen. In the presence of light energy from the sun, this happens inside the chloroplasts in the leaf, with chlorophyll being the green pigment that absorbs the light energy. The glucose made by photosynthesis feeds all animals on Earth, and the oxygen made keeps us alive.
Okay. So thank you for watching the lesson. Are there any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions, Charles?
Less. Yeah. So if you use one of the condition over some place,
Oh, I think we lost Charles there. Well, thank you very much for watching my lesson. I hope it was helpful and hopefully you learned something new.
Thank you so much.